There's a technology that powered over 1 million vehicles during the Second World War. It required no gasoline, no diesel, no engine swap, no electricity. It used firewood. Chopped wood was loaded into a sealed steel chamber heated to 1400 degrees Celsius in a low oxygen environment, and converted into a combustible gas through a process called gasification, a process first used in the 1870s for street lighting and cooking. That gas, a mixture of carbon monoxide, hydrogen, and methane, was piped directly into a standard internal combustion engine. In Germany alone, 500,000 vehicles ran this way, supported by a national network of 3,000 firewood refueling stations. Sweden had 73,000 wood gas vehicles. Finland had 43,000, including 30,000 buses and trucks, 7,000 private cars, 4,000 tractors, and 600 boats. Australia had 72,000. Volkswagen manufactured Beetles with the gasifier built into the body, completely invisible from the outside. The technology was proven, the infrastructure existed. The fuel was renewable, practically carbon neutral, and grew on every inhabited continent on Earth. And then the war ended. Cheap oil returned. And within 5 years, nearly every wood gas vehicle on the planet was gone. Not because the technology failed, because the oil industry, now valued at over $6 trillion annually, needed you to believe there was no alternative. There always was. It was growing in your backyard. Now, before you dismiss that as wartime desperation or primitive engineering, you need to understand what is actually happening inside that steel cylinder, because the chemistry is not primitive, it is elegant, and it has been understood by engineers for over 150 years. The process is called gasification. It occurs in 4 distinct thermal stages. The first is drying. Wood, even air-dried wood, contains residual moisture. As the temperature inside the reactor rises, that moisture is driven off as steam. The second stage is pyrolysis. At approximately 250 to 700 degrees Celsius, the wood begins to decompose thermally. Its complex organic molecules break apart, releasing volatile gases, tar compounds, and leaving behind a carbon-rich residue called char. The third stage is combustion. A small, controlled quantity of air is introduced into the reactor. Not enough to burn the wood fully, but enough to generate intense heat, pushing temperatures up toward 1400 degrees Celsius. This partial combustion is the engine of the entire process. It creates the thermal energy needed for the fourth and final stage, reduction. In the reduction zone, the superheated carbon char reacts with the combustion gases, carbon dioxide and steam, and converts them into carbon monoxide and hydrogen. These are combustible gases. They are fuel. The resulting gas mixture, called producer gas, has a documented composition according to MIT Press and the Wikipedia articles sourced from Charles Fayette Taylor's internal combustion engine in Theory and Practice, of roughly 51% nitrogen, 27% carbon monoxide, 14% hydrogen, 4.5% carbon dioxide, 3% methane, and trace oxygen. The nitrogen is inert, comes from the air introduced during the combustion stage, but the carbon monoxide, hydrogen, and methane are all flammable. Together, they produce a gas with an energy density of approximately 5.7 megajoules per kilogram. For comparison, gasoline contains 44.1 megajoules per kilogram, and natural gas 55.9. Producer gas is far less energy dense, but it is produced in real time from a renewable solid fuel that costs nothing if you own a tree, and it feeds directly into any internal combustion engine. Not a modified engine, not a custom-built engine, any standard gasoline engine with a mixing valve and a basic filtration system. This is not theoretical. German engineer Georges Imbert developed the first practical mobile wood gas generator in the 1920s. Mass production of the Imbert gasifier began in 1931. By the end of the 1930s, approximately 9,000 wood gas vehicles were operating across Europe, almost all of them using Imbert's design. Then the war came. Fossil fuels were rationed. Gasoline was redirected to the military. And the technology that had been a curiosity for 9,000 enthusiasts became a lifeline for an entire continent. The numbers are staggering. According to Low Tech magazine, which compiled data from Finnish transport records, Swedish government archives, and German wartime documentation, the following producer gas vehicle counts were recorded. In 1942, before the technology had even peaked, Sweden had approximately 73,000 wood gas vehicles, France had 65,000, Denmark had 10,000, Austria and Norway had 9,000 each, Switzerland had almost 8,000. By 1944, Finland had 43,000 woodmobiles, of which 30,000 were buses and trucks, 7,000 were private cars, 4,000 were tractors, and 600 were boats. Germany, the largest adopter, had approximately 500,000 producer gas vehicles on the road by the war's end, served by a national infrastructure of 3,000 dedicated firewood refueling stations, where drivers pulled up and loaded chopped wood into their vehicles the way you pump gasoline today. Australia, on the other side of the world, independently deployed 72,000 wood gas vehicles. Altogether, well over 1 million producer gas vehicles operated worldwide during the Second World War. And these were not stripped-down emergency vehicles limping through the streets. Volkswagen produced factory-built Beetles, known as Holzbrenner, with the entire gasification unit integrated into the vehicle body. From the outside, you could not tell it was a wood gas car. Refueling was done through a port in the bonnet. The system was invisible, factory-engineered and mass-produced. Mercedes-Benz models had the gasifier hidden entirely in the trunk. These were not backyard experiments. They were industrial-scale manufactured vehicles. Modern amateur engineers have since confirmed and expanded the technology's capabilities. A Dutch engineer known as Dutch John converted a Volvo 240 to run on wood gas using a stainless steel gasifier unit. According to his published data, the Volvo reaches a top speed of 120 kilometers per hour, 75 miles per hour, and maintains a comfortable cruising speed of 110 kilometers per hour. 30 kilograms of wood, roughly 66 pounds, provides a range of 100 kilometers, or about 62 miles. If the back seat is loaded with sacks of wood, the range extends to 400 kilometers, 250 miles, comparable to many modern electric vehicles on a single charge. An American builder named Dave Nichols converted a 1989 Ford F-150 pickup and reported a fuel efficiency of approximately 1 pound of wood per mile. He loaded 180 kilograms, 400 pounds, of wood into the truck bed and drove 965 kilometers, 600 miles, without stopping for fuel. Mother Earth News verified his numbers, 1.25 miles per pound of dry wood, with the truck operating 37% more efficiently on wood gas than on gasoline. So here's the question that the petroleum industry has been avoiding for 80 years. If a car can drive 62 miles on 66 pounds of free firewood, and a truck can drive 600 miles on 400 pounds, and the technology has been proven at scale across a dozen countries and over 1 million vehicles, and the fuel is renewable, grows on 6 continents, and produces emissions that Low Tech magazine describes as considerably cleaner than direct wood burning and comparable to burning natural gas, then why are 300 million Americans paying $4 a gallon for gasoline? The answer is not technical. The answer is economic, and the timeline makes it perfectly clear. The war ended in 1945. By the early 1950s, West Germany, which had operated 500,000 wood gas vehicles just 5 years earlier, had only 20,000 left. Within a decade, the number approached 0. The technology did not degrade. No one discovered a fatal flaw. No regulatory body banned it. What happened was simple. Cheap oil flooded back into the global market. The petroleum infrastructure that had been built for the war effort was repurposed for civilian use. Oil companies, many of which had profited enormously from wartime fuel contracts, dropped gasoline prices to levels that made wood gas economically inconvenient by comparison. Not technically inferior, economically inconvenient. There is a profound difference between the two, and the oil industry has spent 80 years blurring that distinction. The global oil and gas market is now valued at over $6 trillion annually. That figure is not a projection. That is current market size reported by multiple financial research firms in 2025. $6 trillion a year depends on one assumption, that there is no viable alternative to petroleum-based fuel. Wood gasification is a viable alternative. It has been a viable alternative since 1931. And the moment it threatened the economics of oil, not the engineering, the economics, it was abandoned, not by the people who used it, by the industries that could not profit from it. But the knowledge never fully disappeared. In 1957, the Swedish government, a country with no domestic oil reserves but vast forests, established a formal research program to prepare for a rapid national transition to wood gas vehicles in the event of a future oil shortage. The program was supported by Volvo and produced extensive testing data across multiple vehicle types over more than 100,000 kilometers of road driving. The results were compiled and published by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations in a 1986 document titled Wood Gas as Engine Fuel. That document remains publicly available today. It contains technical specifications, efficiency data, and operational guidelines for producer gas vehicles. The United Nations published a manual on how to drive a car on firewood, and almost nobody knows it exists. Then, in 1989, the United States government went even further. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, published a document titled Construction of a Simplified Wood Gas Generator for Fueling Internal Combustion Engines in a Petroleum Emergency. The document contains detailed, step-by-step, illustrated instructions for building a functioning biomass gasifier from commonly available materials. It was designed explicitly for a scenario in which petroleum fuel becomes unavailable. The United States government commissioned, wrote, and published a full construction manual for a device that lets you run a car on firewood. and filed it away on a government server where it has sat, largely unread, for over 35 years. The document is hosted by the National Technical Information Service and is accessible to any American citizen. Let me put this in perspective. Your government published the blueprint. The United Nations published the operating manual. The Swedish government tested it with Volvo across 100,000 kilometers. Over 1 million vehicles proved it worked under the most extreme conditions of the 20th century. Volkswagen mass-produced it. Modern builders have confirmed highway speeds, competitive range, and practical daily use. And the technology remains virtually unknown to the American public. The oil industry does not need to ban wood gasification. It does not need to make it illegal. It does not need to discredit it publicly. All it needs to do is exactly what it has done. Keep it out of the conversation. Keep it off the curriculum. Keep it out of the news cycle. Because a technology that lets you drive a car on a resource that falls from trees and grows back in a decade is not a threat to physics. It is a threat to quarterly earnings. And in a $6 trillion industry, quarterly earnings are defended at any cost. Now I want to be honest about the limitations, because this is not a fairy tale and I am not selling you a fantasy. Wood gas vehicles have real drawbacks. The gasifier unit is heavy and bulky. Starting the system takes approximately 10 minutes while the reactor reaches operating temperature. Engine power output is reduced by 35 to 50% compared to gasoline because of the high nitrogen content in the producer gas and the slower burn rate of carbon monoxide. The range per load is limited unless you dedicate significant cargo space to carrying wood. Tar buildup requires regular cleaning of filters. And carbon monoxide, a key component of the gas, is colorless, odorless, and lethal, meaning any leak in the system is extremely dangerous. These are real engineering challenges, but they are not unsolvable problems. They are challenges that were managed at industrial scale across 12 countries in the 1940s, with technology that is now 80 years out of date. Imagine what modern materials, science, modern filtration systems, modern engine management computers, and modern safety engineering could do with this concept if even a fraction of the $6 trillion spent on petroleum infrastructure were redirected toward biomass gasification research. We are not talking about replacing every gasoline car on Earth overnight. We are talking about acknowledging that a proven, renewable, low-cost fuel technology exists, has existed for over a century, has been tested at national scale, and has been systematically ignored by the dominant energy industry because it cannot be metered, monopolized, or sold at $4 a gallon. The first wood gas-powered vehicle was built by T.H. Parker in 1901. That is 125 years ago. The Imbert gasifier was mass-produced starting in 1931. Over 1 million vehicles proved the technology under wartime conditions. The FAO published the technical manual. FEMA published the construction guide. Volvo helped test it over 100,000 kilometers. The fuel grows on trees. The emissions are cleaner than direct combustion. The engine requires almost no modification, and the entire system can be built from scrap steel and common hardware. Every piece of this technology is documented. Every claim is verifiable. Every number is sourced. And the reason you are learning about it on this screen instead of in a classroom or a car dealership is not because it does not work. It is because it works too well, for too cheaply, using a fuel that nobody can patent, nobody can refine, nobody can ship across an ocean in a supertanker, and nobody can charge you $4 a gallon to pump. 1 million vehicles ran on firewood. That is not a theory, that is history. What we do with that history is a choice, and for 80 years the choice has been made for you. Maybe it is time you made it yourself.